When Paul talks to these believers, there's this woman who's the seller of purple, there is this young slave girl, and there was this Philippian jailer. And who knows who else then came to the faith. Kind of an interesting group of people that had come together. We know something else about the church of Philippi. It was a poor church. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 talks about this church had no wealth. It was poverty-stricken. So that was another thing that we know about it. Think about just the passage you read, that you heard read for you this morning. Think about what was going on in the church itself. So that's kind of like the origins of the church. Now think about what was going on in the church. Let's go backwards if we could. Verse 6, they were worried about something. We don't know what. It just says, be anxious for nothing. Don't worry, but pray. What were they worried about? Well, if you were poor, living in an outpost of Rome, in a Roman colony, you found your church in the origin, finding its origin in conflict. I mean, there's probably a lot you could be worried about. So he tells them, don't worry. They were anxious. They were anxious about something. He says, let your reasonableness be known, verse 5, to all men. That word reasonableness is a really interesting word. It's probably one of the hardest words to translate in the New Testament. We really don't have an equivalent of an English term that conveys the thought of this word. You saw the ESV translates it reasonableness. I think that was NASB up on the screen. It translated it gentleness. The King James will translate it meekness. The idea of this word is that in the face of provocation and evil, you are calm. It's a really interesting word. Meekness probably is, I think that old English term is probably the best word. It has the idea of power under control. Every time I think about it, what I think of is, because I just love driving fast, I think of a car that has a really powerful engine. I think of a Dodge product that's got this massive Hemi engine in it, and you can go like really super fast. Like I want to go to Montana just to drive the highway. Because there they like restrict, there's no restriction of the speed limit. Like you can drive as fast as you want. Like that's where I want to go. I want to go to the Autobahn. I want to drive as fast as I can. I want to take this power under control and unleash it. That's this word meekness. So when he says, let your reasonableness be known to all men, the Lord is at hand, I think what he's saying is, in your world, in Philippi, in your world, there's a lot of conflict, turbulence regarding the faith. And he says, don't respond in like kind, right? We don't respond evil for evil. What do we respond evil with? Good. So Paul, we respond evil with good. The Lord is at hand. You read the creed. The creed said he will come and he will judge the living and the dead. Paul says in Romans chapter 12, vengeance is mine. He goes, you don't repay. You, as far as you're able, you live at peace with all men. I will repay. Vengeance is mine. We don't step into his place. And so he says reasonableness. So that tells me that there's some turbulence in their world. Then back it up a little further. Interpersonal relationships, verses 2 and 3. These two ladies are having some kind of problem. We don't know what, but they're having some kind of problem. There's some kind of issue going on here. Don't know what the issue is. We just know that they were faithful fellow laborers with Paul. They were engaged in ministry, and there was something between them. And Paul is appealing to somebody else to help them overcome their differences so that the gospel wouldn't be hindered and they could labor together. In other words, there was conflict without, division within. And then he says, based upon chapter 3 and possibly the false teaching that might have been coming through Judaism at them, he tells them to stand firm. That verb he uses there to stand firm is the statement that Paul makes when there's this push of false teaching on believers. And he says when believers are pushed with false teaching, we are to stand firm. We are to stand against it, but we are not to move off the rock upon which we have built our lives. Now we come to our verse. That's the context in Philippi for our verse. See, suddenly now when he says, I want you to think on these things, man, that is very different, isn't it? Like, think on these things. There's a lot going on in Philippi. Think about America right now, 2020. Right? A lot going on, isn't there? I mean, man, there's a lot going on right now that we have in our country right now. The pandemic. I'm here because of the pandemic. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the pandemic. Pastor Eric would be here. Pastor Nick might be here. I mean, somebody else would be here. Somebody of your fellowship. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mind it. But the pandemic has created a lot of turbulence. We're coming into Thanksgiving. Families are apart. Will they get together? How will we deal with it? A lot of noise around the pandemic. What's true? What's not true? I mean, if you are a conspiracy theorist, man, you are having a party, aren't you? Because, I mean, you look online, there's every conspiracy out there about what's going on with this thing. There's a lot of turbulence going on. A lot to agitate our minds. Get us moving. Think about the election. I was looking forward to November 3rd because I thought it would be over. Like whoever wins, okay, it's life, right? That's just the way it goes. It's okay. Like somebody's going to win. And I thought it would be done. Man, I've got a sister living in Georgia. I sent her a text and I said, she said to me, in this text, she said, how you doing? I said, I'm doing great. I said, I can't imagine your life. You got 8 more weeks of campaigning. Man, I'm like, I can't. Like, I was ready to have this thing done. Is it going to be done? I don't know. It is just crazy. Like, who is the president? Well, we got one now. Do we have another one? Will we have another one? I don't know. I mean, is Michigan for Trump? Is he for Biden? I don't know. Is it true? Is it been an election that has been stolen, or is this a legitimate election? I don't know. A lot to get your mind agitated with. Religious liberty. In my 30-odd years in the life of the church, as I've been a shepherd, I have never heard more discussion about religious liberty than I'm hearing today. Man, it's just all over the place, religious liberty. Will we have our religious liberties? Will we be able to continue to experience what we've experienced in our nation, being free to worship the way we want to? Like there's a genuine discussion going on in so many circles about religious liberties. The economy. Man, because of the pandemic and the election, there's all this discussion about the economy. Culture. We have I thought the culture wars were maybe kind of dying down. Man, they are just being stoked with fire right now. Is there a lot to capture your mind? Yes, there is, dear friend. That's why what Paul says here about the art of thinking is really critical for us as believers. If there was ever a time the church needed to think clearly about issues, it's today. We need to be really wise in the way we approach life, because the mission of the church has not changed, dear friends. In light of all the circumstances and situations that we're finding ourselves in, the mission of the church has remained. It's the advancement of the gospel. He said he will build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He said he will accomplish his purpose as we commit ourselves to doing his will regardless of our circumstances. And that is why what Paul says here is so powerful to us about, finally, my brothers, he says, think on these things. That's what he says. Right? He just says, I'll get it there. It'll come. There it is. Finally, brothers, look at the verse. Right? I've taken out the description, and I've just given you the kind of the meat of the verse, like the force of it. Finally, brothers, think about these things. And it's that verb to think. That's what he wants us to do.